Hey everyone, it's Hugo, and it is time for my favorite reads of 2018. I read 45 books in total last year and I am satisfied with this number. Overall, I enjoyed my reading experience and I've read from different genres and different age ranges. Today I'm only going to discuss books that affected me the most and that I've given 5 stars. The first book that I'm going to mention is not going to be a surprise for anyone. It's The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Jenkins Reid. Jenkins Reid took over booktube by storm this year with this book, and many people picked up her other work because of The Seven Husbands. Seven Husbands had such a success, in my opinion, because of a few reasons. As people, we are fascinated with fame and stories of famous people. And in the story, Jenkins Reid created a star that is so fascinating and eccentric that you cannot not be interested in her past. The novel follows a journalist named Monique who starts a job at the magazine she's been dreaming to work for ages. She's given an opportunity to take an interview from an iconic Hollywood star that kept a lot of secret throughout her career. And this interview could kickstart Monique's career if Evelyn Hugo, the icon in question, is going to be truthful. This novel is incredibly addicting, and part of it is due to how well written Evelyn Hugo is and how intricate and how fascinating her personality is. Evelyn Hugo is Cuban. She comes from a bad part of town, but she builds her life from the bottom and uses people around her to uplift herself. Her rise to fame and her career is built on the sacrifices that she makes of her culture, her looks, her body, and her relationships, and sometimes even her happiness. I really love this, and I'm happy that more and more mainstream books of such quality get fantastic queer characters. The next novel that I really loved and that checked a lot of my personal boxes was The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by McKenzie. First of all, I really love historical fiction. Second of all, I love an adventure. And third of all, I love camp. This is the novel that combines all three elements. It's a romp, it's an adventure, it's full of quirky, fun characters. It is set in different pieces of the world as the characters travel to get to their end goal. I really enjoyed it. In a way, it reminds me of The Three Musketeers, and I cannot even explain you why. Something was similar in these two books. The story follows Henry Montague, who is a gentleman and who is supposed to inherit his family's fortune. He's quite privileged and spoiled, only not in love, because he has a very tense relationship with his parents, especially his father. As an act of rebellion, Henry never follows the rules. He loves partying and he loves both men and women, which doesn't make his relationship with his parents better. When Henry turns 18, he has to start working for his father, which is one of his biggest nightmares. And as a final hurrah, he is given an opportunity to go on a grand tour of Europe, which is something Sons of the Lords have done in the past as a part of acquiring knowledge about other countries in the world. Henry's best friend, Perez, who is mixed race and who's also a gentleman, is going to accompany him, and Henry for the longest time had a huge crush on him. So during this trip, he hopes that they're going to figure out their feelings for each other. But to his disappointment, his father is sending Henry's younger sister Felicity with them, and of course an adult to look after them. This story is a lot of fun. I really like the characters. I love the development that Henry has from the first page till the last one. And I enjoyed that especially because it wasn't on the nose, and because Henry was an interesting character. He was a shit starter, and I don't see a lot of characters in young adult in general who have so much agency and who act instead of just thinking about acting. So because Henry gets into so much trouble himself and creates so much of it, it makes this story a little bit more entertaining. I was also hooked on the romance between Perez and Henry because their obstacle wasn't necessarily external, it was an internal obstacle because they couldn't understand each other, and Henry couldn't fully get what Percy is coming from. Anyway, I've been entertained for hours with this book and I really loved it. The next favorite is Radio Silence by Oseman. Oseman became an author I want to read everything from after I read this book because Radio Silence was such a good and soulful read. In the core of this book is friendship. And I always forget how much I miss friendship in books. It is very well developed and written. It is about outcasts finding a new family, and I really liked it. The story follows Frances Javier, a biracial teenage girl that is studying a little too much. She has friends, but it seems like they don't know her very well. She has a secret though. She's been a fan of a scripted podcast for a very long time, and in her free time she's drawing fan art for this podcast. One time her fan art gets noticed by the creator of the podcast. He messages Frances to ask her if she wants to make official art for the podcast. And when she meets the creator of the podcast, it turns out to the person that she knows but never expected to have the same problems that she does. The story is about pressure that people put on themselves and about pressure that society puts on us. It's about family dynamics that sometimes are toxic. It's about friendships that can save your life. It's about mental health, and it's about queer relationships. This book also has a fantastic demisexual character. Frances herself is bisexual. The cast is full of other queer characters. I really liked this novel. It broke my heart and it healed it bad. The next novel is Juliet Takes a Breath by Gabby Rivera. This is a novel I have not heard a lot of things about, and I highly recommend to all people to pick it up. It is a contemporary story about a lesbian Mexican girl that discovers feminism through a book that was written by a white woman and whose activism is not perfect. I do feel like sometimes this book is a little predictable, but I loved the protagonist so much. I do think that this book is incredibly important, especially being a young adult book, because many people get into activism early and sometimes they don't understand that their imperfect activism can harm other people. This book is also about family and the importance of family. It is about self-discovery. It is about finding your own path. And I think it was very well done. The Summer of Jordi Perez by Spalding is my favorite FF contemporary romance this year. I wanted to say to date, but there are quite a few others that I love. Not that my heart can't keep more of them. Some people say they have a separate stomach for desserts. I have a separate heart for FF romances. The Summer of Jordi Perez is the FF romance of your dreams. It is enemies to lovers, but not exactly. It is about a plus-sized girl who does plus-sized fashion blogging and who wants to work in fashion. She gets an internship in the local dress shop that she really likes, and when she comes to the job, she realizes that she's not the only intern that was hired. The name of her nemesis is Jordi Perez, and the protagonist finds herself in a twist because she suddenly starts falling for the enemy. I love the story because the premise has a lot to offer, but also because of the incorporated messages. The story had an interesting look into a relationship between a mother and a daughter, between two lovers that just start a relationship, between co-workers, between bosses and employees. I really loved how it wasn't just a romance, but still it was a fantastic romance. And I really think that this novel deserves to be a movie because it's one of those movies that queer women are going to love so much. The relationship between Abby, the protagonist, and Jordi is not only wholesome, they actually get to work on their relationship and communicate their issues with each other, which I really enjoyed. A thriller is an unusual favorite for me, but Sadie by Courtney blew me out of the water. I have not expected a young adult thriller/mystery to be so good. Usually they are playing a little safe because they cannot use certain tropes and certain topics due to the age range of the book being so young. This book didn't play it late. I loved the character of Sadie. I think she's a very unusual protagonist. For example, she started and she looked very innocent. She was a very vindictive and angry person inside, and it didn't make her a villain at the same time. Sadie has a dual point of view, and it follows a story of a young girl that was murdered. The first point of view is of the investigative journalist that makes a podcast about the murder. And the second point of view is the point of view of Sadie, who is the older sister of the murdered girl. She thinks that she knows who killed her sister and she wants to get her revenge. I've listened to this book on audio and I highly recommend it because it's a production, and I think that it made the book even better. The dual point of view was done very well. It alternated at perfect moments and it was enough amount of suspense and enough amount of storytelling to keep me interested. The last book in this video is There You Breathe by the Pontes, Peebles, and this book was given to me by Riverhead Books in exchange of an honest review, and I loved it so much. This book reminded me a lot of the Evelyn Hugo, but it took a different turn. The Air We Breathe is also a story about a Hollywood star, but you don't get her story through her eyes, you get the story through her friend's eyes. It is about Sofia Salvador in the past, Graça, and her friend Doris, who became one of the most successful Brazilian musicians in Hollywood. They were raised in Brazil on a sugar plantation, where they dreamed of being something more. Doris was an orphan who worked at the plantation and who was always fascinated by music, and Graça was the daughter of the plantation owner. They developed a friendship that carried into their adult lives. They ran off from Graça's father to build a career on their own. This book features interesting time periods and places, such as the underbelly of Rio de Janeiro and the behind the curtain of Hollywood, which are two buzzwords I'm going to look for in 2019 because of the novels that I've read in 2018. The moment when the girls left the plantation, I knew that I'm going to love this book because the stories of these two characters were so well written. Not only the way they got to be famous, but also the relationship between them and the dynamic they've had. It's this intense jealousy / friendship / romantic affection. I heavily recommend this book to all historical buffs who also enjoy their novels with a sprinkle of queer characters. That's all the books that I wanted to mention in my favorites. Some other books got their 5-star ratings from me, but I think they just have not left the same imprint, and even though I enjoyed them, I can't really say that they are my favorite. In the comments down below, tell me if any of the books that I mentioned are your favorites in 2018, or maybe you want to read them in 2019. If I have not mentioned any of the books that were your favorites in 2018, Tell me which are your favorites. Thank you for watching this video. I hope to see you soon in my next one, but until then,